You know, a lot of you guys have been following my channel for a long time. And I was looking back the other day and I realized that I did my first video for this channel in 2007. That means I've been doing Arborist, Blair, Glenn YouTube videos for 15 years now. I've got over 1,000 videos on my channel. Actually, it's like 1,018. And I try to do one a week. Typically, it'll be a Saturday morning that I'll gather up all the stuff that I've put together over the week. I catch little bits here and little bits there from jobs, from consultations, or sometimes I'll just be driving down the road and I'll see something really interesting. So my mind is always going, what can I put together for the next episode? A lot of you guys also ask me about, books that I read and how I gain my knowledge. And it's multifaceted. I mean, I've been a certified arborist for over 32 years, and that means I attend a lot of conferences. I have to continually watch continuing education programming or read certain articles, to keep up my CEUs. And that keeps me engaged. About a year ago, I came across a podcast. And I wanted to share this with you. It's, I'm not endorsing him for any other reason that I really like this podcast. So I'm not making any money off of this endorsement. But there's a couple of guys that did a podcast. They call it Completely Arbitrary. And one guy's name is Casey Clapp. He's an arborist up in Portland, Oregon. And another guy named Alex Croson, who is his sidekick or so. I don't know really who manages the whole thing. I think Alex is the one that puts the programming together. But they have a banter that goes on, and every episode that comes up, they try to feature a new tree. And as I drive around, I like listening to podcasts. So this particular podcast, they'll drop in the name of the tree that they're featuring, but it's not all about that one tree. They'll talk about other trees that are related or associated, and it's usually about a half an hour or so, sometimes a little bit longer. And I gotta say, I thoroughly enjoy it. So I'm giving that podcast 2 thumbs up. So go check it out. Completely Arbitrary. Now, unlike a podcast, my YouTube channel features moving images of the trees that I'm talking about. So in some ways, I like the YouTube aspect of seeing what we're talking about, but because I drive so much, I love having an audio podcast going on in my ears. So this is an interesting tree I want to talk about. Lucy called me up and said, we have a tree to look at that we're not going to be able to identify. So I'm not telling you what it is because it's completely dormant right now, and it has some odd characteristics. Obviously, it's surface rooted. It's also a tree that has sort of an unusual shape to it, and it was falling apart. Branches were breaking everywhere. And I got a call from the owner to come out there and do a pruning of it, but not knowing what it was left me kind of in a lurch. I had to go online and find out. It actually hit his car there, so I went in and cleared it so he could get around there. But I looked throughout the whole tree. This tree is called a Chitalpa. It's related to the Chitalpa, and it's a hybrid of 2 different trees, and some sort of a desert tree and a Chitalpa brought about this tree. Apparently it has beautiful flowers. Well, when I looked at the flowers, I did realize that, yes, I have seen this tree before, but I've never worked on one, and I wasn't even sure what it was until I did a little bit of research. So if you know about this tree, tell me. But from my observation here, I've got to say that I see a lot of problems. I see that it's got surface roots. I can see a lot of decay. The homeowner said this tree wasn't very old, and all the broken branches up there tell me that maybe this hybrid is susceptible to breakage problems, kind of like the Bradford pear. Anyway, in the long run, it's a drought-tolerant tree. It is full sun. They say 25 feet or so. So give it a try if you want to, but I'm not seeing positives here. You know, I like to talk a lot about how to prune a tree. And people always want a step-by-step, exact, detailed explanation. And that's never the case because A, every tree is different, B, every species is different, and C, every situation is different depending upon where the tree is located, who planted it, if it's too close to the building. And so there are reasons for pruning a tree that are sometimes not about what the tree needs. So I want to show you a little bit about a few smaller trees that we worked on, liquid ambers, and I want to show you a few examples of what the trees look like after I've pruned them, so you get a better idea what, I can't say the best job, but it's the best job that I could do given the criteria and the circumstances. So you've got to follow the needs of the client, but don't overdo it. So let's go look at some liquid amber trees. One of the topics I try to convey is the decisions that we have to make when we're pruning trees. And here we have a couple of defects of rubbing branches. So from my perspective here, what I can envision is as this gets bigger and this gets bigger, ultimately it's going to push this apart and cause the main central leader of this small tree to self-destruct, and then there won't be a central leader. So there's a broken bit up here that blew out. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take off this side, and if you follow it all the way down, it comes over to here. So I'm going to make one clean cut with a handsaw right here and pull this out and leave that. But if I cut it in such a way that will prevent this from splitting apart or minimize it, then hopefully this can evolve into something worth keeping. So I made my choice, and you can see where it was rubbing here partially. If you look closely, you can see this branch is almost completely dead. It's all dried out. And I didn't recognize that when I made the decision, but I think I probably made the right decision here. So I'm going to leave this tall center leader to continue to grow tall and make a few selective cuts. This is kind of almost a training cut for this tree, because if I was to reduce it, then it would become a big, wide, bushy tree, and that's not the characteristic of a liquid amber. A lot of times the decisions that we have to make are based upon the location of the tree. This liquid amber should not have been planted here in the first place, but because it's here, it grows into the building and sticks out way too far. It is a tree that is not too popular. It's a messy tree and has all these damn liquid amber balls all over the ground. So this tree is done. I left an adequate amount of interior branches, but I cut it back so it's not hitting the building, and it looks pretty good. It looks pretty balanced. I didn't top it, and you can see how much I took off of the tree down here. There was a lot of branches that were wide, or had Ys in them, so I took off one side of the Y to minimize the weight. One problem that some of these trees have is they're not really strong trees, and when they get up above the shelter of a building, the tops sometimes, which haven't grown accustomed to wind gusts, will blow out because they're more they haven't hardened off like a tree that's in a windier, natural, native environment. So it's kind of a case of the tree does fine until it gets up above the level. So a lot of the trees around here, we found broken bits up on the tops. Well, here's another liquid amber tree that's all done. And a lot of people will look at it from a distance and say, well, it doesn't look like you did very much. We did have to bring it back in from the building and separate it But you notice I did not reduce the top. I left it, taller and narrower. And this is all the brush that came out of this tree. And I don't take out all the interior stuff. Some people totally strip out the insides of the tree, but it's really not the best way to do the job. You should leave a little bit of interior suckering, a little bit of interior foliage, so it's more of a balanced tree. So I took out a lot. I did all the things I needed to do on this tree, but didn't overdo it either. Oh, the poison oak vine. This vine here is about 4 inches thick. Look at that thing. It's completely eating this oak tree. And at this time of the year, there aren't any leaves on it, so it'd be really easy to have somebody go in here and just slice into this stuff. Then you'll get the oil of this horrible plant. But there's some interesting things about this plant that I like to say. It's got this absolutely beautiful red fall color. So it's kind of a love-hate thing. It grows all through the woods in different areas. And I've been watching this vine for years and years, and I have no idea how old it is. But it's this vine has looked exactly the same for 30 years that I know of, and it's completely eaten the whole tree. I have seen situations where poison oak vines were much more significant than this. Oh, should I touch it? Oh, no, I don't want to touch it. Actually, the oil is not quite as prevalent in the bark or the wood of the poison oak. It's mostly in the leaves. But if you were to cut into it, then the oil, aruserol, I think is what they call it, if it gets on your skin, it can be absolutely horrific. Now, we don't have poison ivy out on the West Coast, but I believe it's the same sort of a noxious type of a plant. Is noxious the right word? Toxic, that's a good one. Toxic type of a plant. But, there was a friend of mine who accidentally cut into a vine and a piece dripped onto his wrist. It was just a small drip, and he wiped it off. And by the end of the day, he had a $50 sized welt that turned into a big black oozing pustule that was pretty scary. I saw it, and I couldn't believe how bad it was. Finally, it went away. I have worked in poison oak and not gotten it. I've worked in poison oak and gotten it a little bit between my fingers here and there. So I think some people are immune to it. I can't say I'm immune to it, but I don't get it near as bad as other people do. I remember one year I had a job when I first started the business, and I had to advertise. I said, I need people that don't get poison oak. And had a couple of guys apply for the job, and we went out, and I was actually using a chainsaw to cut down these vines along these telephone poles, and I worked on that job for about a week, and I got a little bit of poison oak between my fingers and on my wrists, and these guys ended up in the hospital. They didn't realize that they were susceptible. So it's nothing to be very cautious around this plant, and poison ivy as well. I don't talk a whole lot about toxic plants, but there's a lot of them that we have to be very, very concerned with. And this is one. I wish I had some of the leaves here to show you what it looks like, but it's actually good to see it in its dormant stage, because recognizing something when it's not jumping out at you and saying, look at me, helps you to realize what it looks like when it's hiding. So this brings up the question, can you build up an immunity to poison oak? And I do know that there's a product out there, I think it's called Immune Oak. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but one day I met this Mexican gardener. Now, I'm not endorsing this, and I'm not saying that you should do this, because I was afraid to do it, but he claimed that he did not get poison oak. And I said, yeah, right. How do you not get poison oak? He says, well, I eat a little bit of it every day. And that kind of shocked me. And at that point, he reached over and he picked a poison oak leaf and he ate it right in front of me. I don't know if that's true or not, but if I hadn't have seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. Personally, I would never do such a thing. I could imagine getting poison oak internally. I know that some people burn poison oak and then get it in their lungs. Building up an immunity, that's something that is a really interesting topic that I think needs to be studied more, because I do know some people get poison oak so bad that it just breaks them down, and sometimes it lasts for weeks.